Everyone. Wait a few seconds as participants enter the webinar.
So I put in the chat, hello everyone, first of all. I put in the chat my introduction, so please feel free to go into the chat, not the Q&A, but the normal chat, and put in your name and your institution, maybe where you're from or what your position is as well, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Go ahead and put that in the chat so we can see who we have here. I'm really excited.
And what you'll probably want to do is when you go to the chat, make sure that you change the to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see that information.
Thank you, Pamela. Or not. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, there's Betty here. Hi, Betty. Wow, lots of people from my school. Hi, Monica, and hello to everyone else as well. I'm just shouting out people I know, names I recognize here. All right.
So I want to thank you all for attending our third Virtual Training Institute. And we have an exciting webinar here for you. Errands Made Easy with Google Lens. If you have any technical issues, you can use the chat box and just send a chat message to all participants, but for the purpose of letting everyone see your what your message is, we ask that you go ahead and select all panelists and attendees. So,
okay.
So before we get started, I'm going to launch a poll so that we can see what role you play in your program, so we know who we're working with in this webinar.
All right, and hello to Donna as well from HCC. Hello to Vidya from HCC. So for anyone wondering, I am in fact from HCC. So if you hear me shouting out people from HCC, it's because they are from my institution. But thank you to everyone from coming. I can see lots of different people. There's Jessie from HCC. Wow, people from all over. Thank you so much. Go ahead and do that poll after you send your information in the chat. And we will be using the chat feature pretty frequently throughout the presentation, so you might want to keep it open as I continue to present.
So it looks like the majority of our participants are ESL instructors, followed by ABE, and then a pretty even split with program administrators, ISs, and other adult education stakeholders.
Great. Okay, thanks, Ramona.
So there are the results for everybody to see. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amanda Walstrum for her presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Ramona. Thanks again. Okay, so as we can see from the title, our presentation today is about Google Lens. So while Google Lens is one specific tool you can use, this presentation in general will be focused on how you can use mobile-based technology and interaction, mobile-based interaction in the ESL classroom in order to help your students gain digital literacy skills. So the main things I want to focus on are implementing transferable and accessible technology skills. So we'll get into what that means in a minute. And as we can see, my name is Amanda Walstrum. So who am I anyway? Let's get into that. So I am an ESL instructor. I'm currently an employee and I shouldn't say employee, I'm currently an instructor at Harford Community College in Bel Air, Maryland. I know there's many HCCs. We also have Howard Community College and Hagerstown Community College. So my HCC is Harford, and I am published in MD Labor's Digital Literacy Framework Instructor Implementation Guide. So that's where all of this information is coming from. So I have a bachelor's degree in ESL from Salisbury University, and I have experience as a member of a team of curriculum developers and program coordinators for a program in Salisbury, Maryland. So while I am an instructor, I have some experience across different fields, so we can have a more well-rounded view of what I do and where I come from. And if you'd like to contact me, I have my information here, and that will come up at the end again. Over in the corner here, you can see my photo with the other ladies from HCC who worked on the digital literacy framework. So we can see Vidya, Jessie, and Rhonda, and of course me. So we all worked together. This was a team effort. So the lesson we're going to work on specifically today is using Google Lens. So Google Lens is a phone application. It works for smartphones, and it can be used with a variety of different functionalities in order for students to navigate the world around them, essentially. So I originally designed this plan for an ESL 1A level, so a rather beginner level, but you can adapt this lesson plan for any level you want, really, because it's easy to change and to move up and down for what you need. So we were using it for around town, so finding locations and navigating your town and city and neighborhood, wherever you might live. But it's functional also for shopping, finance, and those sorts of similar concepts. And we'll get into why they all work in a minute. So it can help them with everyday errands. Basically, oh, sorry. So it can help your students with everyday errands by using the investigative and technical element of the digital literacy framework's list of skills. So if you aren't familiar with the skills, I have them over here in this nice little pie chart. So these are the 7 skills that MD Labor has defined to create a digitally literate learner. So all of these elements are working together to help students gain and maintain digital literacy. And while the investigative and technical elements are most prevalent for this particular lesson, you'll see that we can find almost every element in almost every lesson, because all of these elements are working together anytime a student is learning. So the students are going to navigate not only their physical environment, but also the internet in order to find information. And they're going to develop their digital literacy skills beyond a traditional desktop computer. And then we can see here, I won't read them all to you, but we can see that my lesson has aligned with the CASA's competencies. I tried to pull from lots of different sections. So let's talk for a second. So let's talk about resources and accessibility. Right now we are living in the digital age, right? We have technology for everything, and we have technology with us all the time. But while it's great that lots of schools have beautiful computer labs with big desktop computers and smart boards and projectors, this is not the reality for every person. And it wasn't for me. When I started teaching in my first ever ESL instructional environment, I was working in a church basement with folding chairs and no computers and nothing. But what do most students have, even if you don't have computers, projectors, smart boards, etc.? What technology is the most widespread among most adults? We can see that coming into the chat right now. And I can see everyone has the same idea. Almost every person either owns or has access to a smartphone. So while digital literacy is important for traditional technology like computers, Digital literacy is not limited to that. Digital literacy works with smartphones as well, because these are computers. These are mini computers in your hand that you have all the time. So beyond using smartphones in the classroom, let's talk about why I chose this particular application, because there's lots of mobile-friendly websites and apps that you can use in the classroom. I chose Google Lens because it's a free app and it has lots of uses. So this app is not intended to be a specifically educational tool. It's a tool for anyone in any part of their life. So we can see over here, the way Google Lens works is that you conduct internet searches not by typing in search terms, but by using your camera. So for a learner at the 1A level in particular, this is a great way to encourage interaction and investigation on online search engines by circumventing the need for them to understand enough of English to create curated search terms. We can just sidestep it and use the camera instead. And the students are learning how to conduct internet searches and how to navigate online platforms without encountering a problem based on what they typed in initially. So we can see here, there's a picture of the camera. So this is from my phone, I screenshotted it, with all the different options. So the camera here, we can hold it around, you can move it and point it at things. You take a photo and then you choose one of the options. And then you can conduct an internet search from there. So the main search functions they have are the translate feature, the text tool, which reads text and creates it on the screen. We'll talk about that later. The search function, the shopping function, and the restaurant or menu function, because restaurants and menus, of course, go together. So this is a great activity if you want to incorporate more realia in the classroom with your digital literacy skills, but you aren't sure where to start. So let's go on. So I have linked here the actual instructor implementation guide if you'd like to look at it later. We won't open it now because it's very long and full of awesome resources, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So to conduct this activity, students only need their smartphones and the realia that you choose to use. The students can find the realia themselves, or you can do it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So what you will do is go around and find things that work with each of the search functions shown in the previous page. Addresses, menus, price tags, all of that good stuff. And if you aren't sure where to start, but you like this lesson, you can take a look at the appendix of the framework where you can see exactly what I chose. And if you're in a face-to-face class and not all of your students have smartphones, you can always have them work in groups or rotate, or you can have one person demonstrate and have the others watch. And if you're at home, if your student doesn't have a smartphone, or if they're attending class from their smartphone and can't do both at the same time, maybe there's someone in their house that has a smartphone they can borrow for the activity. So let's talk about each part. The first part we have is the menu scan. So this works for restaurant menus online and physically. So if you want to use more realia, you can of course get a paper menu. So students actually take a photo of a cafe menu using the restaurant option. So they find the circle here, they choose it, and then they take a photo of a paper menu. Maybe you ask them to print a menu online. Maybe you give them a menu that they can look at and print, or you give them a menu that you have printed if you're in a face-to-face classroom. And what I initially had students do was take a photo of the menu in its entirety and search for the cafe's website. Because when the app takes the photo, it will highlight all of the parts of the photo that students can use to conduct searches. So to track if the students have been successful in finding this information, you can use just a normal worksheet that you have created, asking questions that you know the students can answer by searching. So for example, mine was, okay, can you find a link to 2 things on the menu and click on them and write down what they are? Can you find 2 foods or 2 items that they sell? And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. We're just seeing if students can search and find. But if you want to get a little more fancy, what else can students do to navigate the cafe website? You can put that in the chat right now because I'd love to hear. Ooh, okay. Monica says you can search for coupons. That's a good one. Maps and directions, finding directions to the restaurant. I can see that from Jessie. Exactly. You can find recipes for foods and ingredients. Oh, someone said COVID precautions. How can you follow the rules if you go to the restaurant? Very good. Restaurant reviews, telephone numbers. Maybe you compare it with a second website, hours of operation. These are all great. All right, so you can see just from a few minutes, everyone has thought of some great ideas for what they could use this for. So let's go on to the next one. Of course, this is the one that students might be most interested in, the translation tool. I will say you need to be cautious with this one because you don't want students relying on the translation tool too much when they go out into the world, because then they might be a little too dependent on it later and it would make it difficult if they couldn't use it. But it's great if you're having a hard time reading something and no one is there for them to get help. So what I used was a grocery store circular. So I went to my local ShopRite grocery store. I got one of the paper circulars with coupons and ads and brought it to class. So what the students can do is first they choose the translate tool. They choose the translate tool and take a photo. We can see the example here. In real time, the Google Lens app will translate it for them. So what I did to track what the students are doing was have them write their first language and their second language, so first and English, and write, okay, what are 3 new words you found from the translator that you didn't know before? 3 new vocabulary words. And what the students can do when they go to the translate tool, we can see it here because the phone is turned to landscape. But if the phone is turned to portrait mode, it will be at the top. They have an option from the first language to the second language, from the language that the document is initially in, so English, to their own language, and they have a drop-down menu of tons of languages they can choose from. So I used a circular, but what are some other things that you might find useful to translate in the classroom using this tool? Oh, Monica asks, can it do pronunciation? Yes, because it goes to the normal translate screen and you can tap it and hear it. But you would have to tap each word one at a time. It will not read a long block of text for you. Beth Johnson says a bus schedule. That would be a good one to translate, especially because there are abbreviations. School forms, Peg Gould says. Generally signs and notices, says Sharon. Doctor's forms, absolutely. So I think we all have the same idea. The place where this would be most useful would be for specialty language. Words that are not common in day-to-day conversation, but are really necessary when you're trying to navigate the world around you. Daryl asks, will it let the student know if the word is a verb or a noun? If they tap on the word and continue to investigate, they can find more important items like parts of speech and things. But I would actually encourage them to do a secondary search. If you really like the idea of focusing on vocabulary building in this part of the activity, maybe you have them conduct a secondary search and continue and continue. Medicine labels, says Nahir Aparicio. That's a good one too. All right, so we already have awesome ideas. So the next one is the more general search tool. And I chose to use it as a GPS function because with the Around Town unit, it goes really well with reading maps. So we used it mostly to use a map. So what the students can do is take a photo of an address. So the realia you need to find here is something with an address. And this is one where it's really widespread. I used a brochure from my college that was talking about testing centers for new semesters for new students. So what they can do is search online using online maps, Google Maps, Apple Maps, etc. So the students needed to find the distance from their location to the location they scanned and write the number of miles. So why is this one so good? What are some other things you can do to explore online searching? Think outside of GPS. What are some other internet searches that students might want to conduct using this tool? You can send that in the chat as well. And think outside of GPSs. When you see a search tool, what would you just love to search for? Imagine you live in a new country and you want to find something. Places to eat, gas stations. Generally, what is nearby, right? When we look on Google Maps, we see places near me. Hospitals, libraries. Oh, I like Donna Lewis's answer, or Cody Rosenbarker's answer, I'm sorry. Exchange rates. So maybe I take a photo of a piece of money. Maybe I take a photo of some cash and I look it up that way. That would be a great one to do. Employment agencies. So I like that we're thinking outside the box. That's why I like this app so much, because the students are doing all of the things that traditional digital literacy needs, for example, conducting online searches and doing the same thing on our phones. Someone says the DMV. Oh, that's a good one. Searching for the DMV. And we can see as well that the Google Lens app here is walking with you. If you turn the camera facing in front of you and you follow the map physically, it will show where you're going and point you to turn that way. If you're walking, driving a car, of course, maybe not if you're the one conducting the driving of the car, but it's a good idea anyway. All right. So the other one we have is online shopping. Especially in the time of a pandemic, we are doing a lot more shopping at home than we used to do, right? So how can we do that if we are a low-level student, but we still need to buy the things we need? So my initial plan was to have the students take a photo of a price tag barcode. So it was just a price tag that I had saved from a piece of clothing I bought. And I made sure to close out the product details. I blacked it out with a Sharpie so the students weren't able to see what the item was for, and they had to find all of it online. So by taking a photo of the barcode, they were able to find the item and find the stores that offer the item, and then go through the online shopping platforms. And the students had to identify the type of clothing and the price, because we had just completed the finance unit, and after the finance unit, we had completed the shopping unit. So our Around Town unit was sort of summing up these other two units, which was why I liked using a tool where we were conducting multiple different types of searches and combining our prior knowledge to do new things. So what other things could you do with the online shopping tool? Daryl says a good one here. Daryl Rogers, translate the sizes for shoes and clothing. We need to remember that sizes are not universal from country to country. That's a good one. Judy Coleman says sales. If you want to find if something's on sale, that's a good one. I like that too. Donna Lewis says Amazon. Can you find things on Amazon? So by searching for something with a barcode, it gives you all of the places you can buy it, all of the online shopping platforms at once. All right, so why do I like this app so much? I am not being paid by Google Lens. You're probably sitting here thinking, why is this person talking about this app so much? The reason I like it is because you can use this to adapt to whatever you need. It's extremely adaptable, and we'll talk more about the adaptability in your actual classroom as well. So to plan the activity, if you like the idea of this, but you have a face-to-face classroom and you aren't sure what to do. I initially designed this for face-to-face classroom. This was a pre-pandemic lesson. So what I did was collected just 4 realia items. I only had one of each, and just created stations. Had the students move around from station to station in small groups and fill out their worksheet packet as they went. But this is not exclusively an in-person lesson. You can make this work for distance learning because it's so great. As long as your students are not attending class from their phones, of course they can do this if they're attending from their phones, but it might make it more difficult because of the camera being used in more than one spot. So I will say it works better if your student is attending from a class, is attending class from a computer, or uses a secondary smartphone to do the activity. So for example, if they're in class, attending class on their personal smartphone, maybe they ask someone else in their house to borrow their smartphone for a few minutes. So what the instructor can do for a distance learning environment is give the students homework before the class. So if I'm doing this lesson tomorrow, today, student homework is look around your house. Can you find something with an address? Can you find something with a barcode? Can you find something with a map? And we find all of the things that we need. Then the next day, the students have not only done more thinking beforehand, they've prepared for what they're going to do, but they were also able to directly apply this to their real life. They had to go through their house and find what they need. But it is important if you're trying to use the same tools that I used, if you're trying to get through all the sections, the students need something with a barcode, a menu of some kind, an item with an address, and any other piece of longer form writing. So something with multiple pages like a newspaper. I see Nahir Aparicio saying that this is similar to flipped learning. Yes, I like that you said that. That's right. So the students are going to go through what they need and they can find whatever they want to find. You'd be surprised how interested these students get, even your technically challenged ones. Because if you frame this in a way that says, all you have to do is take a picture and the technology will do the rest, it makes the students who are a little challenged with technology feel more comfortable because they don't have to do so much on the back end before they get the results that the instructor is asking for. So as an extension, what we can do is give them homework after class to experiment with the app and write down their findings. Maybe if your students like to journal, you can have them keep journals. You can give them a worksheet if you're at a level where maybe they need a more facilitation to write what you're asking for. So they can just have some fun. I remember when I first discovered this app, I was just pointing it around at things at my house, having so much fun, taking pictures of plants, taking pictures of the television. I was having a great time, and the students, I promise, will do the same. So let's go on to the questions here. So just to recap, before we start answering the questions, the reason we are talking about this app today is because you are able to encourage your students to conduct investigation online by circumventing the need for curated search terms. So while it is important that students know how to conduct internet searches with search terms, it doesn't mean that you need to wait until level 2, 3, and 4 ESL classes to do an activity like this. You can do it with beginner level students. So we're bridging the gap between the equitable instruction. All students can do this activity no matter their level or their confidence with technology. Everybody can do this. And also, we're negating the need for traditional technology in the classroom. We don't need a computer. We don't need a smart board. We don't need a projector. We don't even need a CD player or a speaker. All we need is the technology that most people already have. So even if you don't necessarily think you want this activity in your lesson plans, I hope that this was encouraging for you to see how you can break the mold of traditional digital literacy in the classroom? How can you incorporate it into what you're already doing? And how can you use it with what you already have? So I can see at the bottom here, I've put my email, my LinkedIn, and also a link to the instructor guide. And I talked really fast today. We have a full half hour left because I wanted a lot of time for questions and comments. And if we are finished with our questions and comments, I'm going to open up the digital literacy framework and show it to you guys. All right, so let's take a look at the questions. For the first one, let's look at the red question. Do you think you will use this activity in your class? Let's have some answers and say why you think you'd use it or why you think you wouldn't use it. It won't hurt my feelings if you say no. And I'll try to read what we can say. Peg says, thank you. This is a breath of fresh air for remote lessons that are getting too boring. Thanks, Peg. Patricia says, most of my students use a phone, so it would be more likely to use as homework. I think this is an awesome homework assignment. It might be a little lengthy, so it would be a good idea to use it broken up into parts if you want to do homework that's not going to take hours and hours, or it would maybe be a good project if you have a long break between your classes. All right. So Cody says, I think it would be difficult while in class via Zoom, right? So actually, not necessarily, because as long as your student has access to a secondary device, the students don't need to be sitting in front of their computer talking to you or listening to you at all times. Because if we think about it, in a Zoom class, it often feels like we must be engaging directly at all times because you can see each other so clearly on your screen. But think about the traditional classroom. Are you constantly speaking to the students and having them constantly listen? Probably not. You're doing individual work, you're doing group work. So why can't Zoom be the same thing? The teacher is just the facilitator. It's okay if the students walk away from the computer for a few minutes and come back, as long as they're doing what you're asking them to do and they're able to achieve it successfully. Maybe they go look through their kitchen, find a jar with a barcode, and come sit back down now that they have it. And then they take their phone and do the assignment. So while it might be a challenge to think about how to do it with the Zoom, don't let it stop you. Think of this as an opportunity to think outside the box rather than as a roadblock. I've been enjoying Zoom because I'm able to think of new things I never would have thought of with a traditional classroom. Peg says this is a novel activity because it engages students. I agree. I think that this is engaging. One of the things that we have a hard time with online classes is keeping the students engaged. Sharon says, it's good because I love to give my students lots of options. This is a very student-led activity. And I think that in an online class, it can be even more student-led if the students are finding the resources themselves. So it's great because we're giving the students the autonomy in order to build their confidence and their independence in navigating their life. Monica says this will be a good exercise to break up the instruction and they would be more confident in using the internet as a resource. Yes, I like that we said break up the instruction. So we don't need to do all of this in one sitting. This is a long activity. It was something that I had planned to do in the traditional classroom and take the entire class. But you don't have to take the entire class. Maybe you do a little bit each day. Maybe it's a warm-up or a cool down. Nahir says, use it as a preparation for class. Exactly. We use it as a warm-up or a homework. All right. Emilia says, it's a great tool for digital literacy, but I would be concerned about lower level students understanding the directions. It's time consuming to implement. I agree. Yeah, we do have to remember that with beginner level students, we need to often allot more time than we think we do. But that doesn't mean that it will take too much time, as long as the students are engaging in productive struggle, as long as they're working toward the goal. So I did originally create this plan to be done towards the end of a semester and as a review of multiple previous units. So I would not suggest this as an activity to introduce a new unit. Rather, I would suggest it as a sort of enrichment activity or even informal assessment for students to do at the end of units that have applied to this. But don't be afraid. I think your students will surprise you, especially with directions that don't involve too many wordy sentences. If it's mostly numbers and smaller words, it might actually be easier than you think. My students really surprised me when we were learning directions and maps in my 1A class. They knew a lot more than I expected them to in English and in general. Claudia says, I will try. This is something my students can explore since they have it already. Oh, you already have Google Lens. Very nice. Betty says, I'm excited about this app because it levels the learning field. Yes, exactly. We are leveling the playing field. All students deserve access to equitable and equal digital literacy instruction. Don't let that scare you. Sarah Collins says, this activity could be adapted for use in prison using a little PowerPoint and creativity. Absolutely. Again, not all students need to have smartphones in their hand right then for this activity to still be successful. And even if you don't want to use the app itself with the students, you can use the app yourself when planning to give you new ideas. Erin says, I can see value in this with multi-level classes. Absolutely. I've taught multi-level classes before. This is one where you can do the same activities, but have different worksheets that go along with them that ask for less or more complex information and findings. Donna says, you're right. Everyone has a phone and many students are not tech savvy. Oh, I think everyone is tech savvy. Some people are just tech novice, I'd like to say. Everyone can be tech savvy as long as they've been taught. So you can take a picture and let technology do the rest. That's right. Jeff says, this sounds awesome, but however, within Maryland Corrections currently, smartphones and internet are banned for security reasons. That absolutely makes sense. And again, this doesn't have to stop you. So you can use the tool on your back end while planning, and on the front end of teaching, you just show the functionalities that it's doing in order to help them find the information they need. So you're doing more of the facilitation and they're doing more of the reproduction, let's say. You're doing the production and they're doing the reproduction. Llama says it's a good tool for vocabulary building. Absolutely, especially if we're using the translate tool or the text tool. All right, and Gerald says, I can't find Google Lens in the Google Play Store. Okay, so Google Lens is an application. If you already have a Google phone, you don't need the Google Lens app. You just go to the search and you can find it. If you have a non-Google phone, such as Apple, Samsung, etc., it's an app you download from the App Store and it is free. Laura says, any suggestions for using in breakout rooms or with groups? Absolutely. This is a great idea because this is actually closer to the traditional application of the lesson plan. So have the students all have their own activities, all have their own realia. Everybody gets one thing instead of each student needing to find all of the categories. So perhaps I have a group of 4. One student finds a barcode, one student finds a menu, one student finds an address, etc. You make the groups numbered based on what you need to do, and then they go in the breakout rooms and work together to find the information. So I think breakout rooms would be an awesome way to do this. All right, so people are saying, yes, it's part of the Google app. If you're trying to find the app on a Google phone, you don't need to find it. You just go in the Google app. So you download the Google app, not the Google Lens app. You just need the Google app and it's a functionality in it. Lots of people are downloading it right now. Yay! It's not Smart Lens. It's in the Google app and you find it. Some people say their phone isn't compatible. Oh no, that's okay. You can still conduct traditional searches using the same idea. So you don't need to use the app. I just like the app so much because if students are intimidated by creating search terms, they don't have to. You can still conduct this activity doing traditional searches as well, typing in. And Ramona says, a copy of the presentation will be made available. Thanks, Ramona. All right, so what questions do you have? Let's go on to the purple. What questions do you have about application and functionality? I know I didn't explain too much of the app itself, so don't be afraid to ask that. I've allotted lots of time on purpose. What questions do you have specifically about using this lesson in the classroom, about how I want to use it or have used it? And in addition, if you can't think of a question, how can you adapt this activity to fit your needs? Some people have said this already, but think about the classroom you're in right now, the classroom you're teaching right now, whether you're physically in it or whether you're in it online. How can you adapt this activity for you? And also, I want people who are not instructors to think about this. How can you use this lesson and this idea in general from the top down? How can you encourage your instructors and facilitate their instruction with tools like this? Peg Gould says you can help students to navigate around town. Absolutely. So the reason I like this app so much is because students gain confidence in going out in their day-to-day life. We can transfer the idea outside the classroom. Sue Cavendish says, not all students have smartphones. This is true. But even if the students themselves don't have smartphones, they probably know someone who does. Or they have been introduced to the search engine in general and how to navigate search engines on computers. So even if they can't use the smartphone application, they've now been introduced to using search engines in general, and they've probably gained some confidence with that too. So just because we're using the Google Lens app in this particular lesson, don't be afraid to adapt it for yourself. Use computers or whatever you have available with you. Just try to investigate and navigate search engines. All right. I'm sorry, I'm afraid to pronounce your name incorrectly. I'm going to guess Ice or possibly Isa Kursky. Any ideas about advanced ESL topics? Absolutely. So advanced ESL does not necessarily mean advanced digital literacy. You can have someone who's extremely advanced in English, but still not super confident with their digital literacy skills, and vice versa. You can have a very low-level ESL student who's awesome at using technology and very well-versed. So for the advanced ESL topics, I would say try to increase the level of complexity in the follow-up work you're doing. So encourage them to follow multi-step directions in searching, encourage them to write longer sentences and descriptions of what they're finding. But I would keep it a little more simple in the searching themselves, in the searching itself. I would say the best one for that is incorporating multi-step directions for ESL advanced learners. Llama says, I can use it for collaborative work such as creating an ad for a product. Yes, that would be a great one. I also have done brochures before, creating brochures for things in your town after you've found them on the app. So you can teach writing. Yep, you can teach multimedia production and multimodal production. MJ Park says, this sounds great for hands-on activities. She also says, or he, I'm sorry, or they, I don't know your pronouns. By the way, I remember one of my literacy class students was stuck with the translation all the time. and couldn't move on for a while. So I'd rather use others more often. I agree. It's very important to be wary of them getting too excited about that translation tool, especially because Google Translate is not always super grammatically correct, right? Artificial intelligence translators do not have the same grammatical knowledge as a person who is a native speaker. But I will say it would be great if you encourage them to use the search app instead. So if they're really stuck on the translator tool and they're afraid to move away from that, and you don't want to pull the rug out from under their feet altogether and say, don't use it anymore, maybe encourage them to use the search tool instead so that they can find other explanations and definitions in the second language, in English, in order to find what they need. So that could be a good way to help them move away from it. Jesse Thompson says reverse instruction. If a student writes their information in their first language, an instructor or intake assessment person can use it to scan the writing and translate to English. Yes, I have done that before. I translated our COVID-19 screening form for on-campus classes using the Google Lens app and sent it to my students. So don't be afraid to use this in your position too, not only for the students, but for yourself. Daryl says use it to enhance vocabulary. Absolutely. All right. And parts of speech. Thank you for your pronouns, MJ. All right. Rhonda says transitioning students to college and career readiness. Absolutely. So this is a great way, again, to encourage students to transition out of the classroom, whether they're moving to a non-ESL classroom, moving to a new job, or they're just afraid to go to the grocery store and they want a little help. This is one of the ways that students have access to their own individual computer. They don't have to be afraid to go out and need help from other people. It really encourages independence and autonomy. Lama says, I can see myself using it when I travel. Yes, definitely. Patricia says, oh, I missed Patricia's question. Sorry. My students do not always like downloading apps. How do you handle this? All right, that's a good question. So I would say the easiest way to alleviate their stress is to have them download it and then delete it later, because you don't have to put in any personal information. You don't really need a Google account or anything to use this app. You just use it like you would use a search engine. So all it's doing is allowing them access to the internet. But I will say, if your students don't like downloading apps, but again, you have enough students around in a physical classroom that you can partner and use different phones, or if you have them online and someone else in their house has a smartphone, that's a good way to circumvent that. Otherwise, I would encourage them to use a traditional computer if they like that better. But of course, they would be typing in search terms rather than using the photo function. But they're still able to find the same information as long as they're following what you need. Now here says you can show what to do with it by screen sharing. Absolutely. So if the students don't like doing the apps, you can screen share from your phone, plug your phone into your computer, screen share what you're doing. Or you can screen record, especially if some people don't like or feel comfortable with the screen share tool in real time. You can screen record on your phone, take a video of your phone screen doing all of the activities, and they can follow asynchronously. So what they can do is you send them all the videos and you have them find the information later, or you have them find it in class and watch the videos together. All right, any more questions or concerns? I really would love to answer them. Don't be afraid. And as we're thinking of that, why did you specifically attend this talk? Because if you attended it for a reason I haven't addressed, I want to address it now. So why did you choose to attend this talk? Why did the title jump out at you from the long list of really awesome, interesting presentations today? All right. Oh, wow. Everybody came in at once. Lama said, I always want to learn about new technologies and tools. Me too. I'm so excited. I'm attending a presentation about Jamboard later. So many new fun things we've never seen. Peg Gould says, I never used Google Lens before or knew about its practicality. Me either. Believe it or not, I saw an ad for Google Lens in a video about a restaurant. So it was like an entertainment video that I was watching for fun. And they were sponsored by this app. And I thought, ding, I can use that in my class. Monica says, I'm always looking for ways to integrate technology. I think integration of technology is important. I think it's very important for us to incorporate digital literacy as another skill in their language and life, as a civics and language skill, rather than as a content area. We don't want to have it be, ooh, okay, everyone, now it's technology learning time, because the students don't feel like it's something they can do in their everyday life. It feels like something special and precious, when really this is applicable and integrated into all of their life. Donna says, I will add to my toolbox of ways to reach ESL students. Absolutely. They were curious about it. It sounded interesting because we hadn't heard of the app before. Don't be afraid to go through the App Store and search for Google Lens and look at like similar, right? Just keep scrolling. That's often how I find things, is just to hunt around. I download it, I point it at things. If I don't like it, I delete it again. No problem. Nasir, all right, Patricia says, thanks for the idea, but most of my students attend class by phone. All right, so Patricia, if they all have a phone to attend class, but you don't think this would work in class, that's when you can assign it as a homework assignment or an outside of class project. So this works for asynchronous learning as well as synchronous. In some ways, it might even work better for asynchronous if you're able to adapt it to what you need. So don't let this stop you. I really want you to think about this presentation and go home inspired to come up with new ways to involve digital literacy and accessibility in your classroom. Even if you didn't like my lesson, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Even if you say, oh, Amanda, I probably won't use this, but do you have some other ideas for me? That's okay. Think of ways to circumvent challenges rather than roadblocks that will stop you from doing something. We can always find new creative ways and new creative technology tools in the digital age. MJ says, I've recognized there's so many useful tools for ELL students from Google extension apps. Yeah, so this is a Google extension app. You're absolutely right. And student engagement is at the forefront for sure. Anne says, on behalf of my low digital literacy students, so that they would lessen their fear of technology. That's why they attended the talk, I'm assuming. So they would use it for their daily activities. Yes, absolutely. So this is awesome, like I said, for the lower level digital literacy students. Or like I said before, we would not say low level, but we would say novice, right? Everyone can learn a new skill, and digital literacy is a skill. It's a literacy. No one is born with perfect digital literacy. We have to learn it, and we have to work through the challenges together. So finding tools that can circumvent that can help students engage in technology in a way that isn't so scary, is what digital literacy is all about. And MJ says, also, even literacy level students want to learn computers and technology. Absolutely. Right. Digital literacy is not limited to ESL and EFL instruction. Everyone needs digital literacy, and most people want it, right? Most people are excited when they learn new digital literacy skills. Patricia says, I just had a lot of issues getting them to try Jamboard. They were complaining about adding the app, which is necessary on mobile devices, but not computers. I think students in my other program were like Google Lens. So I do also want to say, don't worry about overcomplicating things, okay? If your students are really wary of doing too much digital literacy, don't force them to do it all at once, right? The Google Lens app is one, but there's many different technologies you can encourage them to use. and you can encourage it bit by bit. We don't have to do this entire lesson in one sitting, all class. Maybe just as an enrichment exercise or a weekend homework assignment, get them to do one or two things to sort of dip their toes in the water, right? And then maybe you'll find that it's not so bad. And also, not every tool works for every person, which is why it's so important for us to try lots of different ones. If Jamboard didn't work for you, that's fine. Try something else. Maybe it'll work better. Not every tool works for every person, every classroom, every student population. Peg says ABE, HSE students would get a chart out of finding information. Absolutely. So again, I'm seeing a lot of navigating your own learning. So having the students initiate the learning and investigation themselves. So most students really feel proud, right? As instructors, we've all felt that. Even if the student is a little scared and they want a little more guidance, after they're able to navigate something themselves and to do something autonomously, you'll find that their confidence will really go up because they realize they can do this without being helped every step of the way. Sharon Evans is using the app right now. When I take a picture, it keeps taking me to the Google Translate app. Will it do this for the students or immediately translate it? Not necessarily. So make sure that when you look at the bottom scroll wheel of options, you're choosing the one that you want. So maybe if you don't want to translate, you use something else. Will it do this for the students or immediately translate it? So you don't also have to take a photo. You can hover. So here's my phone. You can hover the phone over it and choose the option, but not actually take a photo. And it will translate it that way as well and show it on the screen. So you don't always have to actually take the photos. Sometimes you can just hover your camera and that will work the same way. All right, the HSE students can find locations and distance time to get there to take their exams. Yes, exactly. That's what I did for mine. I had a brochure with next semester's new student entrance exam testing, the address of the entrance exam building, and that's what they had to find. I will say, make sure not to give them an address that's too close to where your classroom actually is if you are in a physical classroom, because then they won't get enough distance to really navigate the map. So try to find something that's at least 1 mile away. Okay, so let's get any last minute questions. We're almost at 4 right now, or if you're in a different time zone, we're almost at the top of the hour. So any more additional questions, comments, concerns? Please don't be afraid to give me concerns. I want to help you think about this. And I'm still learning too, so please don't be afraid to give me some suggestions for what I can use next time. All right, we can see. Thank you all for attending. Thank you so much. And again, I will send out the presentation later, just like Ramona told us. So please feel free to look at the guide itself. There's lots and lots of applicable skills, not only for ESL, but for ABE and GED classrooms as well. So maybe if you won't use this in your class, but you've got a friend who teaches GED, math, and they really want to use it, go for it. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone is saying thank you. Thank you for attending, everyone. MJ says, I'd love to get the resources links directly. I will send them in the chat right now. All right. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can send them in the chat. So the link to the guide is what I will send because that's the master link of all the other things I talked about. You can find pretty much all of them in the guide. All right, so I've just posted the link to the Digital Literacy Framework Instructor Implementation Guide. And if you go on the maryland.gov website, you can search for it on there as well and find the partner publication that's the Digital Literacy Framework. All right, and Ramona has just sent the proof of participation. So if you need that for your professional development documentation at work, there's your link. All right. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. I appreciate all of your attendance. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you go home thinking about ways to implement digital literacy and think outside the box in your classroom. Even if you don't use my lesson, I hope that I got the cogs whirring in your mind to incorporate accessible digital literacy.